ready for true happiness, for deep fulfillment, for feeling alive, on purpose, and in control of your life again? It's time to be the bold, brilliant, beautiful woman you were born to be. Welcome to the PurposeGirl podcast. I'm women's happiness and life purpose expert Karen Rockhind, and I'm going to teach you how to live on purpose, feel alive, and be happy in every aspect of life. I'm going to get real about my life and interview women who are living on purpose so that you can finally live yours. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Purpose Girls. So a friend of mine called me that her husband needs to have a biopsy because the doctor didn't like something that she saw on him. And then there was an x-ray taken and now they want a biopsy. And to say that she is freaking out, afraid, is an understatement. She's downright terrified at possibly losing her husband. And the fact is that no matter how many happiness tools I learn, no matter how much I learn to live my purpose, no matter how much I teach you about happiness and purpose, nothing is going to prevent the inevitable challenges from happening in your life. If I could, I would take them all away. I would take them away for her. I would take them away for you. Someone I love who is on her second bout of cancer, I would take it away from her. Someone else I love who has struggled with infertility for years and years, I would take it away from her. I would take it away. I would take the pain away from a client of mine whose husband committed suicide. I would take it all away if I could, and I can't. I can't because challenge is part of living. In fact, I think that that's really how we get our wings in life. The challenges that we go through, it's how we get our wisdom. It's how we get our strength. It's how we get our courage. And so today's episode of the Purpose Girl podcast is all about how do we overcome those challenges in a sense of well-being. I once heard someone say that positive psychology could be said struggling well. I love that term, struggling well, because the fact is that we're all going to have pain. We're all going to struggle. But how do we struggle well? And that is what today's episode of the Purpose Girl podcast is all about. And of course, you're going to want to stay tuned until the end when I give you purpose power tips. And we have quite a show for you today. First, I want to share a review that did make me happy. So a review from Saoirse in the Philippines. She says, "A show that will make you happy. Listening to this podcast makes me happy. Karen is like your own personal cheerleader." Aw, thank you. She's always so positive and full of life. It's contagious. You will not regret listening or subscribing to this show. Love it. Oh, thank you, Saoirse. That is so sweet. Saoirse Sky in the Philippines. And I read these because I want you to know that you're part of a global community of women listening to this podcast all over the world. And I also read these because these reviews that you are all leaving is making an impact in more women finding us. I always say that the Purpose Girl podcast is about changing the world one woman at a time. And the more you all leave your 5-star reviews, the more women can find us. So please, if you have not yet left your 5-star review, please pause this episode. It will mean so much to me. I do all of this just because I love you so much and I love sharing this work with you and empowering women. So go over to Apple Podcasts, leave your 5-star review, and maybe I will read it on air. Okay, back to how we overcome challenges. So let's talk about the challenges that we're all going to have to overcome, right? Life is full of them. Every single day is full of them. Today, I went to make my lunch and we didn't have what I wanted to eat. And I was like, I don't have time to go to the grocery store. It's like a little challenge, right? Totally easy to overcome. And then there are different size challenges. Maybe we think of them as like small, medium, and large. Last week, I was thinking about going to a women's retreat. I lead so many women's retreats and love it. And I also need other people to care for me and pamper me and need to get the nourishing and support. And so I had contacted a friend who I knew was having a retreat just like 5 days later. And I had been out of town every single weekend in 2019. I had been out of town and working. I should say that. I'd been working every single weekend. And so I But I was like, you know what? I really need it. And it sounds so great. And so I contacted her and I said, okay, I'll come. And then for some reason, the credit card didn't go through on the machine. And even though it went through 5 minutes before and 5 minutes after, like something was up. And I thought, maybe I'm not supposed to go. And then by that night, I was so tired. And I thought to myself, you know what I really want this weekend? To do nothing. I want to sit on my couch and I want to nap. You know, I had been working every weekend, out of town. I wanted to rest. But I was so afraid that I was now going to let my friend down. And so I was faced with this challenge. Was it really a big deal? I hadn't paid yet. You know, as far as official registration, no. Even if she was disappointed, ultimately, was it going to hurt her life? No. Was it going to, hurt her finances? No, because I just said the day before that I was wanting to come. But I was so afraid of disappointing someone. So we might think of that as like a small challenge, right? And I don't know about you, but those are the ones that usually throw me off, kind of the smaller ones. And we'll talk about strategies. What do we do with that? So second, we might think of like medium-sized challenges. There's a group of people in Josh's life who I have had challenge with for some reason. It's like nothing I do with these people is good enough. Like they just don't like me or we just don't get along. I don't know, but it's been incredibly painful. You know, when I married Josh, I was so excited to pick up his community of people. Like I had this, dream of my people and his people all merging. And for some reason, I just can't create that connection with these folks. Like I wanted to have them all over for Thanksgiving a couple of years ago, and one of them didn't want to come to Philadelphia for Thanksgiving. And so, the next thing I know, the whole group wants to go away, and then we look like the jerks because we don't want to go away. I love hosting Thanksgiving, and I wanted them to come here. And so I end up kind of like the bad person. And I feel like with this group of people, that's constantly happening. And it's a quote unquote medium challenge because these are people in Josh's life, and these are people that I'm going to see for a long time. And it has caused me a lot of heartache. And so it's kind of like that size challenge, right? And then, of course, there are the really big challenges. Really big challenges like what my friend is going through with her husband's biopsy, or what my client went through when her husband committed suicide. Or for me, 5 weeks before I went to graduate school, I took my friend Ed out on my boat. Living in Cleveland, Ohio, I had a boat, and Ed had lived in Cleveland his whole life, had lived near the lake his whole life. Cleveland is on the Great Lakes, Lake Erie, and he had never been out on the lake. And so I said, I'll take you, And he wasn't like a best friend of mine. Ed worked in my building, my condominium building, and he was my dog walker. So he walked my dog every day when I was at work. And when I would wake up in the morning and go to my car was washed. So, Ed was a friend, certainly, but I didn't know a lot about his life. And so I said to him, I'll take you out on my boat. He's never been on the lake. So he met me July 24th, a few years ago at the dock. And when we went out on the boat, we were having a great time. He had brought a couple beers with him, and I had Diet Coke with me. And, we tooled around on the boat, and I let him drive. And then at one point we anchored for him to swim because he had never swum in Lake Erie. And he dove in, and he never came back. He was having trouble swimming. And he started treading water. And I started saying, come on, Ed, then just, swim back. And I could see he wasn't able to swim the 10 feet back to the boat. And so I started throwing him the rope. Ed, catch the rope. I was screaming, Ed, catch the rope. And he couldn't even get it. And I knew I needed to try to get to him. And then the next thing I know, his head went under the water and he never came back. And before my miscarriages, that was the worst day of my entire life. Witnessing someone drown, witnessing someone die, and wondering if there was anything I could have done differently. And 5 weeks later, I was supposed to go off to graduate school. I was supposed to pursue my big dream and my purpose. And I just thought, how could I possibly pursue my dream and my purpose when Ed can't even live? And so that was the kind of trauma, the kind of challenge. What do we do with that? Right? There are all these different levels of challenges. And that's why I say, if I could take them away, I would. But then even as I say that, I think, well, would I? Because what would life be if it was just rosy all the time, or it was just happy-dappy all the time? First of all, would we even know that it was rosy and happy-dappy? Because we wouldn't have the depth, right? They say you have to know the darkness in order to know the light. And whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. I know that I spent a lot of my life just wanting light, just wanting everything to be happy all the time. And maybe that's even why I went into this profession, to learn the science of happiness. But what I do know now is that the challenges in life are what give us character. The challenges in life give us strength. The challenges in life give us that wisdom to know what really matters. So my friend was saying to me, I have to go to work today. Like, how do I work when this is going on with my husband and she's the primary breadwinner and she really needs to go right now? But she also can sometimes be a workaholic. I know I can too. And so this challenge is like resetting in her mind that priority. Or with my story around Ed, that challenge, at first I wasn't going to go to graduate school. I said, forget it. If Ed can't live, like, who the heck am I to go to grad school? That's terrible. Ed had to die, suffer. I'll suffer. I won't go. And then as I really sat in it, Ed had been so excited that I was going to go to graduate school. Ed was so excited that I was following my dream. And part of maybe why he was excited is because he was learning from me to follow his own. So he had been sharing with me that he really wanted to get into the military, that he really wanted to do something that was productive, that was doing more with his life. And so he had applied to the military, and he was 42 years old, which is the cutoff in the United States for the military. And he found out that he got rejected because of a heart murmur. And that was just a couple weeks before Ed died. And so I thought, well, I actually have to go to graduate school. I'm going to go in Ed's name. I'm going to live my purpose in Ed's name and live on the purpose that he wasn't able to. And I wish that he had told me. I didn't know that this had happened to him, that he got rejected. I only found out afterwards. After he got rejected, apparently he started doing drugs, and he was chock full of cocaine the day that he drowned in that lake with me. And I think maybe if I could have talked to him about purpose, maybe if I could have shared some of these tools, maybe, I didn't even know them yet because I hadn't gone to grad school, but maybe I could have saved his life. And so I knew once I heard the full story and what really happened that I had to go to graduate school. And that's how we start to use our challenges and how to struggle well. So many people are familiar with the term post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. We hear about it all the time, right? Soldiers returning home from war with PTSD, someone who has been abused when they were a child, sexually abused or molested or abandoned, PTSD. There are so many instances of PTSD, and my heart goes out to every single person who has ever suffered from PTSD because it is challenging. When you have been through trauma, it gets stuck in your body. It gets stuck. And thank goodness, that is the moment to go to therapy. That's the moment to get some trauma support. There are wonderful therapies now in rapid eye movement and in hypnotherapy and so many things that you can do now with trauma. One of the things I've thought a lot about is how we can have big T and little t. Big T are traumas like abuse or military, going to war, or cancer, right? There are big traumas. I also think of what I call little T's, which frankly can kind of mess us up just as much as the big T's, but they're not considered in the psychological research as a trauma. Those are things like one of my clients in middle school, the girls didn't want to sit with her at lunch and she had to sit alone. Was she physically abused? No. Was she even mentally abused? They weren't saying anything to her. She just had to sit alone. And that is traumatic. Or one of the things that has been a little T trauma in my life, my dad, I love him. He gets a lot of airtime here on the PurposeGirl podcast. My dad has been very opinionated my whole life. And he has a definite definition of what is right and what is wrong, right? I grew up in a wonderful Jewish family, and there is a clear way that it is right to be Jewish, right? You keep kosher, you go to synagogue every week. There's a very weird way to be wrong, to be Jewish, right? And he meant it just to teach us values and to teach us what's right. And I am not at all, like, this is not at all anti-him. It's more just to say that I learned my whole life, like, what dad thinks is right is right. And one of the things, we used to go for Chinese food every single Sunday night. It's just a thing. I've learned that other Jewish families also did this. Every single Sunday night we went for Chinese food. And we ordered water with our Chinese food. And if someone at the next table ordered a Coke, my dad would be like, who drinks Coke with Chinese food? Like, that's just not, no one does that. And I learned, oh, you're good if you drink water with Chinese food. You're bad if you drink Coke with Chinese food. And so I started dating my first husband my freshman year in college, and we went for a Chinese meal one night, and he ordered a Coke. And I was like, you can't do that. You're not supposed to order Coke with Chinese food. And it's because, I had taken like my dad's opinion and swallowed it whole. In psychology, we call that an introjection. I had introjected his opinion whole as a right and a wrong. And rather than kind of looking at it and saying, oh, Dad, that's ridiculous, or fine, that's what you believe. I believe something different. His opinions, again, my dad was not abusive. There was nothing, like, he's wonderful. I love him. Rather, him being very opinionated about what's right and what's wrong led to a little T for me. And it was a little T around, can I trust myself? Am I okay? Anytime I have had a difference of opinion, something that different than what he would want or that he believes, I have really second guessed myself. And that's why I've told the story on the Purpose Girl podcast that when I left my 6-figure vice president job to go back to graduate school and learn positive psychology so I could teach all of you, and my dad said, that is the stupidest decision I've ever heard, I was in a panic because I have second guessed so much of my life. And so that second guessing comes from this little T trauma. And I bring up the big T and the little T because I want you to know that if you suffer from something like indecision or something like not trusting yourself or something that is kind of deep-seated insecurity, and you're like, but I wasn't abused, it's okay. I'm still going to call that trauma on this episode. We're still going to say that that is a challenge that you can overcome. That is a challenge that you can learn to struggle well with. And it's very possible that you ended up with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, with a little t, right? Any of those could lead to anxiety disorder, could lead to depression, can lead to suicide. So it's very possible that a little t leads to PTSD. So here's the thing. This trauma, right, as psychologists have always considered it sudden, unexpected, unusual physical harm or life threat, a lack of control. I'm going to count for post-traumatic stress disorder, whether it's this big T as psychologists have defined it or as I define a little t. But either way, unfortunately, shit happens. Bad things happen. From a 1995 study from Kessler and colleagues, they found that the majority of people will experience at least one trauma in life. And about almost 70% of women report having experienced a trauma. And I wonder if that is even higher now. I'm guessing that that's higher now because we're seeing so many more people report, so many more women report their Me Too traumas, and so many more people in general report their traumas. So when there are consequences, about 20% of women and about 8% of men have experienced post-traumatic stress disorder. And that is something that, as a psychological community, my colleagues who are therapists, any of you who have experienced this, we need to do the work in supporting people in healing and overcoming and struggling well. Here's the other side of that. If 20% of women have experienced PTSD, that means that about 80% of the women who've had a trauma have not experienced PTSD. And about 91% of the men have not experienced PTSD. They have resilient reactions to trauma. Resilient reactions to trauma, the bouncing back, or the using trauma for growth. And so while people are very familiar with the term post-traumatic stress disorder, fewer people are familiar with the term post-traumatic growth. And what happens, our responses to trauma, and there's no good or bad here. In fact, they both happen at the same time for many people. Responses to trauma are sadness, anger, ruminating thoughts that you keep thinking about what could go wrong, what did go wrong, what is going wrong, depression, anxiety, PTSD, physical tension, fatigue, things with your gastrointestinal system. Other responses to trauma, though, some people have a renewed appreciation for life. When I was robbed at gunpoint, there was a gun to my head and I survived that. I have an appreciation for life since then that is unparalleled because I understand that tomorrow that could all be taken away from me. I said to a client recently who's going through something traumatic, I said, when I had that gun to my head, I decided I was going to live, whether I don't know if I'm going to have another gun to my head tomorrow. So I better live today completely. I don't know if I'm going to have a gun to my head next year. So this year, I better really do it up. Right? I better travel wherever I want to travel. I better work on the book. I better love as hard as I can love. We don't know. So we have all of these responses to trauma. We can grow from trauma. You could learn. One of my clients, she had an abusive partner that finally, thank goodness, finally that partner is gone from her life, left her house. And she told me that because of it, though, she became so much closer with her sisters, with her siblings. And had that trauma not happened, she wouldn't have had that experience of bonding. And so as much as we can have the challenge, we also can have the positive. And this is what we call post-traumatic growth. Speaking of living fully, we all want to do the right thing to keep our bodies healthy. That's why I eat kale salads a lot. It's why I eat lots of fruits and vegetables. But still, most of us are not getting the healthy nutrients, essential nutrients we need on a daily basis. That's why I take Ritual, the obsessively researched vitamin for women. A couple of years ago, when I started my fertility journey, I learned that even though I ate well, I was not getting many of the essential vitamins and nutrients that I needed. Ritual has D3 to omega-3. It fills in the gaps. I learned that I needed folate, not folic acid, as do most women. Plus, these vitamins, they taste so good. They're like mint or lemon, and they do not hurt my stomach when I take them. They've changed my life. I was being paid by them for my podcast, and then I became a paying customer. So you will love these. But better health does not happen overnight. And right now, Ritual is offering my listeners 10% off during their first 3 months. It's an amazing offer to help you fill in the gaps in your diet with essential for women Ritual vitamins. It's a small step that helps support a healthy foundation for your body. Visit ritual.com/PurposeGirl to start your Ritual today. Again, that's 10% off during the first 3 months at ritual.com/PurposeGirl. You will be so happy that you did this. Okay, back to post-traumatic growth. So what is it? Tedeschi and Calhoun, the psychologists who have developed this term and researched it, have found that post-traumatic growth is the experience of positive change that occurs as a result of the struggle with a highly challenging life crisis. So in other words, we grow because we're struggling with something. And in that struggle, that's when we learn, oh, now I understand my life priorities. Or we struggle with something and we go, oh, these are the people who I can count on. And this is what relationship is really all about. So what these researchers have found is that there are 5 aspects of post-traumatic growth. One is that someone who experiences post-traumatic growth, who grows from trauma, might find new possibilities for life. And this is really where purpose comes in. The woman who I mentioned on my episode about the women I admire on International Women's Day, Dr. Tara Rai Trent, she realized because of the poverty that she grew up with in Zimbabwe and then making it to college and PhD, she realized that a new possibility for her in her life coming out of that poverty was to be able to empower girls and women with education. And she now is sending girls to school. And this is amazing what she's doing. So we can, in the midst of trauma, we can struggle with it and realize that there's a whole new possibility for life that we didn't see. And we see this a lot. A friend of mine struggled with breast cancer, and then she left her corporate job in order to become a coach and help other women with breast cancer. We can see this all the time. And so this is where we really turn our pain into purpose. It's post-traumatic growth. Another aspect of post-traumatic growth is deeper relationships with other people. Like I mentioned, my client who became closer with her sisters. You can see this perhaps in your own life or in other people that you know, where some trauma brought 2 people together and now they're much closer. Josh and I have been loving the Netflix show, Grace and Frankie, with Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin. And, their husbands fell in love with each other. And then the two of them, who did not even like each other before, became best friends. Now, is that art? Is it life? We all know experiences like that, where two people who go through a similar experience suddenly become close because they're struggling with it. A third pathway to post-traumatic growth is some sense of personal strength, that you realize you have the capability, you realize how strong you are. One of my clients had been emotionally abused as a child. She had been ignored. She had had many people, her siblings and others, say mean, nasty things about her. And she always wore that as a black mark. She thought that there was something wrong with her. And fast forward now, she has done amazing things with her life. She rescues animals as her living. She has a beautiful partnership. She has great friends. And I pointed out to her what strength she has, that she survived what she survived. And here she is. And she had never seen it that way. And so we really dove into this old story and the struggle that she's had with not fitting in, not belonging, not being good enough. And we shifted it into, oh, this is actually an example of personal strength, of post-traumatic growth, that you can say, it's not that I'm strong despite what happened to me, but I'm strong because of it. We see this all the time. Someone I know, their child died of cancer. And I don't know this person well, but what I've gathered from this person, as horrible and challenging as it was, is how much strength this person realized. Like, they didn't even know that they could survive something like this. But now seeing how strong they are. And I bet in your own life, you have examples of that. Maybe an example, my client who I mentioned, the kids in middle school didn't want to sit with her. Well, the strength that gave her in being able to have personal confidence, being able to go to other kids than when she got into college and into the work world and being able to approach others, personal strength can come from trauma. The fourth pathway into post-traumatic growth is spiritual change. And a lot of times you go through trauma, and I've noticed with some people, it's like, then there is not a God, right? If a God could take away my partner or my child. Another friend of mine had fertility issues. She and her husband had a miscarriage. And as she really felt into it, she's a very spiritual person. She really felt into what happened here, what is going on. What came to her was that there are other children in the world who need her. And that's an example of new possibilities. And she and her husband ended up adopting a child. But what happened on top of that, once she adopted this other child and her husband has children from a previous marriage, she said to me, I realized that God was giving me the exact children who need me. So struggling, trying to find meaning and understanding this trauma of her miscarriages and then later adopting, and it only came years later. It doesn't have to happen right away, right? But in really working to overcome this challenge, this pain that she had had around her miscarriage, she realized it was like she'd already been spiritual, but a new spiritual awakening of, wow, God was actually paving the way for me to have my adopted child, because that was the exact child who needed me, and for me to become closer with these other two kids of my husband. So God gave me the exact children that I need. And the spiritual change can go either way. It can, that you have a deeper sense of spirituality, a deeper sense of faith, which is post-traumatic growth. Or it could be that you've had faith and now you've lost faith. And that would end up more being like post-traumatic stress disorder. But in terms of overcoming challenge, the idea here, the opportunity here is to allow that challenge, that trauma, to deepen your sense of spirituality and faith. And listen, it can be hard. I still don't have a spiritual reason why I had the second miscarriage. And I may never, right? I've really struggled with it from a spiritual perspective. And why did God take away two of my babies? And why haven't we gotten pregnant? And there could be a million reasons. And I don't have that yet. Growth, though, is saying there has to be some sort of higher purpose here. This or something better. There must be something else out there for me. And of course, what ended up happening because of my second miscarriage was creating Women's Global Happiness Day was the first worldwide event to teach women positive psychology. And we had 98 events around the world, from Nigeria to the Philippines, to Luxembourg, to Toronto, to Philadelphia. And that wouldn't have happened without that miscarriage. And the last is an appreciation of life, is really being able to say, life is short. Life is short, and I am going to use every moment of it. A lot of people talk about with traumas and challenges, like, what's the lesson I learned? I don't like that word because you know what? Lesson just makes me think that it's like school and it's education and you had to get this life lesson. And that does not feel good or growth to me personally. Maybe it does to you. I would rather think of it as, what wisdom did you gain? How did this inspire your courage? How did this renew your sense of strength or give you more strength? Or how did this support your relationships? When we think of wisdom, right, wisdom is what comes internally. And when we can step back from any challenge and say, how did I grow from this? What do I now know that I didn't know before? What would I tell an 18-year-old going through the same situation? Right, I've shared on this podcast, on the PurposeGirl podcast, that I was abused by my first love. When I was 16 and 17, I was madly in love, and I was also being beaten. And wisdom is asking myself, what would I say to a 16-year-old who was going through it? What would I say to a 17-year-old? And what I would say to a 16 or 17-year-old who was going through it, first of all, I would hug that young one. I would hug and hug and hug that young one, and I would brush his or her hair and love all over them. And then I would look them in the eye and I would say, you deserve better. You don't have to put up with this. There will be love again. You did nothing wrong. This is not your doing. And you're going to be safe, and I'm going to make sure that you're safe. Now that's wisdom. It's not a lesson. Like, I feel like a lesson is like, I don't know, that I did something bad and I have to learn the lesson. No, it's wisdom. What would I share with someone else? Now, our wisdom becomes purpose. And so an opportunity for us to overcome a challenge when we're ready, this is not an immediate, an opportunity to overcome a challenge is post-traumatic growth, is to apply one or more of these and say, how could I allow this to strengthen my relationships? So the first miscarriage that Josh and I had, we really took that as an opportunity to become closer as a couple. We were very intentional about that. We really bonded over this shared challenge together. So that's one way, looking at these 5 inroads to post-traumatic growth, to overcome those challenges. Before that, there are some things that can really help you. Number 1, you've got to get the charge out. So whether it's we're going to go back to the small challenge, right? I didn't go to the retreat and I was afraid I was going to disappoint someone. And so I had all sorts of like mental, chaos in my mind, like, oh, she's going to be mad at you and all that kind of stuff. Or the situation with these people who are in Josh's life, I'm so charged by it. It triggers me so much. It causes so much pain for me. But I can't, when I'm charged, then I'm going to react really poorly. I'm going to take it out on Josh, or I'm going to take it out on these people, or I'm going to take it out on myself, right? That's when we start beating ourselves up. And so number 1, we've got to get the charge out. And I know this, and I still needed some of my friends last week to remind me with a situation that was going on with these people in Josh's life. You've got to get the charge out. So how do we get the charge out, right? So you are allowed, you are entitled, you are going through challenge, you are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to be sad. You are allowed your grief. And one of the shames of the perception of positive psychology and happiness is that you're supposed to be happy-dappy all the time, only yellow smiley faces. Wrong. We are redefining happiness here on the Purpose Girl podcast. Anger is normal. It is okay. Sadness is okay. Every emotion, there's no positive emotion or negative emotion. They're just emotions. And what emotions do is get your body in motion to respond to something. So The emotion of anger helps your body say, oh, I'm being attacked. I need to attack back. That's healthy. That's healthy. The emotion of happiness tells your body, oh, this is good. Let's do more of this. So no emotion is good or bad. We just have to know what to do with it. And the thing is, though, when we feel that anger or we feel that grief, we don't know what to do with it because it's never been okay in our society. And so we get a lot of charge built up. We feel very threatened. And then we often take it out on ourselves or on someone else. And so getting the charge out allows us to then be able to handle the situation at hand. Also, if we don't let the emotion out of our body, the challenging emotions out of our body, they get stuck there. And that's when emotions show up as disease, right? You end up with some sort of bowel disease because the stress, the acid has just eaten up your stomach, or you end up with migraine headaches because it's just causing you so much tension. We end up with depression. We end up with anxiety disorder, and it gets stuck in our bodies. So what we have to do to live our happiest, healthiest life is actually allow ourselves the full range of emotions. I call this the full range. And I want you to think of a mountain range. One of my clients, Zoe, gave me that analogy, right? A full mountain range, it's only beautiful because you've got highs and lows. You've got peaks and you've got valleys. So I want you to think of the full range. You are entitled to the full range. So when you are going through something like my friend whose husband is going through this, I said to my friend, when you have a moment and no one else is around, I want you to go into a room, close the door, and I want you to have a temper tantrum like a 2-year-old, right? What would a 2-year-old do? They would stomp their feet, they would stomp their hands, they would punch the air, they would scream, they would cry. Get it out. Get it out. Well, she felt kind of foolish doing that, and she felt like there was no time. So then she calls me this morning in the car, and I said, are you alone? She said, yes. I said, okay, great. This is a perfect time. And we practiced screaming together, and I let her scream at the top of her lungs that I kind of want to do right now, but I don't want to like scare you while you're driving or you're listening to this podcast, but screaming at the top of her lungs. Another way to get out the charge is to move it. The way that our bodies are designed, right? Our early ancestors developed this fight, flight, threat response, stress response, because if a saber-toothed tiger was coming at them, they had to run. And so what would happen is their body got the shot of adrenaline, the shot of epinephrine, the body got all the hormones, the cortisol shot to be able to run and run away or be able to fight some sort of physical activity. But what are we doing? We're getting all angry, whether it is about a family situation, it's about your kid not doing their homework, it's about something like a biopsy. And then we're sitting, and it's just sitting in our bodies. And it's kind of like just collecting plaque in your body, and it has to go somewhere. Where it's going then is like acid eating your body. It's going into tension headaches. So we actually have to move it out of our body or else it gets stuck for years. If you sweep shit under the rug long enough, eventually it's going to start to stink. I cannot say that enough. So you've got to move it. So how do you move it? Maybe you go for a run. Maybe you go for a walk. Maybe you get a punching bag and you punch the heck out of it. One of my mentors taught me to take a bat into the woods and just beat the shit out of a dead tree, not a live tree. You go up to a dead tree, you ask the dead tree, is it okay if I beat you up? And wait for the tree's answer. And then you can just beat it up. Or take a Nerf baseball bat, something that's like foam or rubber to a stone, and then beat that. Another one of my mentors, she calls it swamping. It's in her book, Pussy, Regina Thomasschauer. She says, put on a plastic trash bag, the black plastic trash bag, poke your hands in through it and like rip that bag out, right? And like stomp and scream and like really, and move it. She also taught me how to do angry dancing and move it kind of through my body in an anger dance. I've been taking erotic dancing and learning how to own my anger in like a powerful woman way. Not a you're so nasty way or I'm so, right? But no, like I'm going to own this. So there are ways to move it through your body, and you've got to remove the charge. Because once you remove the charge, once it's out of your body, you can actually deal with something more rationally. But when you're in that fight flight, you can't deal with the situation rationally. Rather, that's when you're ruminating, you're worrying, you're only in worst case scenario catastrophizing. Another way to remove the charge and to get support when you are going, these are purpose power tips. right? Number one, get out the charge physically. Number two, when you're going through something challenging, this is your time to lean in. And I don't mean the Sheryl Sandberg way, even though I love you, Sheryl. What I mean is to lean into friends. Lean into a safe space, a group of women or a friend, whoever that might be, who can hold you, will let you cry, will let you scream, will scream with you, will make nice to your hair. That's what my grandma always called it, making nice, right? Sweetly petting your hair, who will hold you. That is an absolute requirement. And it's why I build the sisterhoods that I build. Because too often as women, we don't have those, right? You have maybe some other moms who you do not feel like letting your shit out to, or maybe you have sisters or sisters-in-law that you just don't feel that close with. We need women that we can do that with. And so that's why when I take women on retreat, like the women I just took on my Greece retreat a few months ago, we get together in a group coaching once a month. So they have women that they feel safe with letting go to. We have to have that supportive network. That's why I created the free Facebook group, PurposeGirl Women's Happiness Network, because I want a safe place. I want women to be able to go on there and to share, here's what's going on, and lean in. When you are going through something challenging, that will be the moment that you want to disconnect. A client of mine was just sick and she texted me, oh, I've been leaning out, but I realized now I should have been leaning in. It's like, yeah, totally, 100%. And you know what? I do it too. I sometimes want to lean out when I'm going through something because I think, oh, I don't want to burden people. No one wants to hear that. They want me to be my happiest self. Or I think, oh, I just don't feel like it. That is the moment when you have those thoughts, when you have those feelings, that you absolutely must lean in. We cannot go through life alone. Human beings are social creatures and we must have people to lean into. And so who is your safe space? And if you don't have it, let me be your safe space. Okay? Join my community, contact me. Let's do this together because we have to be able to have that connection. When we lean into friends, we create yummy, nourishing, healthy hormones like oxytocin. And what we know from oxytocin, which is also the cuddle hormone, is that it helps to offset the cortisol and the challenges of stress. It's why women have a stress response that's called tend and befriend. Women lean in and it helps us to support one another. And it actually helps us be healthier for life. So number one, get out the charge physically. Number two, lean in. And doing so will help you with the charge. Number three is working with your mindset. So we have a tendency to think worst case scenario, right? So purpose power tip number 3 is to even out your mindset. How often when you're going through a challenge do you think worst case, take my challenges I've told you about. Worst case, these people are going to hate me. Worst case, Josh is going to lose this group of people. Worst case, right? Worst case. Or for this friend who contacted me about her husband, worst case, he's dying. In her mind, he's gone tomorrow. So I had to ask her, well, what about best case? Hadn't thought of it, of course. And she said, can you do that? And I said, not easily. That's why I teach this, right? Like I teach that which I have to learn. Because my brain, all of our brains go to worst case. So we need to even it out. And in positive psychology, we have a tool that we call worst case, best case, most likely. And worst case, this is when you're worrying about something. Worst case is you write out all the worst case. So if that happens, okay, the diagnosis from the biopsy is positive, it's cancer. Okay, then what's the worst that's going to happen? Well, then what's going to happen is that then there's going to be chemo. Okay, then what's the worst? Okay, then, he's going to lose his hair and be sick. Okay, then what's the worst? Then he's going to die, right? And then what's going to happen? Then we're not going to have any money. Then what's going to happen? Then we're going to lose our house. Then what's going to happen? My kids and I are going to be, living in under a bridge, right? So your brain goes there anyway, so you may as well write out worst case. But we don't leave it there. In positive psychology, right, we balance it out. Positive psychology is not happyology to just be happy all the time, to struggle well. At least give yourself the opportunity for a balance. And now, the other side of the paper, we say best case. So what's the best case here? Best case is that the biopsy is clean. Then what's the best case? Then, he lives well. Then what's the best case? Well, then we now know how important life is. We have a new appreciation for life, and we go on that trip to Paris that we've been wanting. Then what's the best case? Well, then we renew our vows. Then what's the best case? Then we live another 30 years together. Then what's the, right? So at least if you're going to go all the way to worst case dying and being, in a cardboard box under the bridge, go to the best case where now you're in Paris drinking champagne and making love. So you may as well balance it out. Now we get to the gold, which is in between. In between is what we call most likely. And this exercise is so well done on a sheet of paper with 3 columns. Worst case on the left, best case on the right, in the middle. Now, what is the most likely scenario? Most likely scenario, in this case, we don't know, right? Most likely scenario, maybe they, find something or don't find something, and the doctors will work with it. Or in the case of my fret that if I didn't go to that women's retreat, then this woman, my friend, would never talk to me again, and that then I'd be ostracized from the community where I know her. That was worst case. Best case was I'm going to really enjoy my weekend. I'm going to feel so good about myself, and she and I will remain friends and everything will be great. Most likely is what happened in the middle. Most likely was that she would be disappointed and I would feel a little bit bad, but I would still enjoy my weekend. And then eventually she and I are going to be okay. And that's actually how it played out. So this mindset tool of worst case, best case, most likely, if you're worrying about something, is a wonderful way to overcome a challenge because we don't know. Your worrying means you don't know. Another way with mindset is to ask what else is true. When you're in the middle of challenge and your brain is telling you what is wrong and ruminating on what's bad, you have to take it upon yourself. We all have to be warriors for our own happiness. No one is taking care of our happiness for us. There's so much in life. You turn on the news and it's like unhappiness everywhere, misery everywhere. You go on social media, it's comparing yourself and you feel like crap everywhere. Like the advertisements everywhere are telling us that we're not thin enough or we're not fat enough or we're not, young enough or whatever it might be. So we have to be warriors for our own happiness. We have to do everything we can to struggle well. And so with our mindset, it is reframing, asking ourselves, what else is true? What else is possible? How else can I do this? And with my friend, she was actually going on all these websites to look at what other people said about this possible diagnosis. And that was leading her into, unhealthy territory. So I said, is it helpful? And she said, no. So we said, well, what would be more helpful? If you want to go on the internet, well, what would be more helpful is to say, what is my action plan going to be if indeed this is cancer? Who are the doctors? Where are the facilities? What are the possibilities? What will I do? Who else can handle some of my work for a while, right? Get proactive. So we are in control of what we think. And we had to laugh. She said, you do this with your mind? And I said, not easily, but yeah, it's like, that's why I teach this. Because I'm learning right with you, my friends. I'm learning right with you. So we can struggle well, and no one is going to do this for us. So as a reminder, a few purpose power tips. Number 1, you got to do something with the charge, and it's got to be physical. Get it out. Number 2, lean into friends. Let others take care of you. Number 3, work on your mindset. And number 4, use the system of post-traumatic growth, the 5 different pathways to say, how can I experience this in the positive, as growth, as learning, as strength building, as courage building? It is hard, but it is possible. Because like everything in life, every moment of life comes and goes. Every emotion that you will ever feel comes and goes. Every thought that you ever have in your mind comes and then goes. And so even all this crap, it too, as everyone says, will pass. It doesn't mean that it won't stick with you. It may stick with you for the rest of your life. But you can struggle well through it and after it by using some of these tools. And so with that, I want you to know that I am with you. I want you to feel like I'm sitting next to you on the couch holding you. I want you to feel like I'm sitting in the car while you listen to this, holding your hand. I want you to feel like you have a friend and an advocate and a champion in life, because you do. I want you to feel like you have a community, because that's what I'm trying to build here with PurposeGirl. And so I thank you for listening. I thank you for being a part of this community. And I want you to know that I genuinely love you with every cell of my body. And I am here for you to overcome any challenge in your life, and not just overcome it with bouncing back resilience, like baseline zero, right? Resilience is when things are bad and you just come back to zero. I want to support you in growth. I want to support you in things, in taking whatever the shit is and rewriting that story into the higher positive. Because remember, every great TED Talk, they were fine, then there was shit, and then they elevated and escalated and they were amazing. Every great book, things were okay, then things turned to shit, and then they, didn't just bounce back to okay and normal, they became amazing. And this is the opportunity with your life too. I'm not saying any of it is easy. My goodness, woman, it has not been easy for me, right? You know all the challenges that I've been through. And because I've had a gun to my head, I know that we get this one life to live, and that we have the ability as humans to not just bounce back to where we were, but to take every experience and turn that into great wisdom that we can share as purpose in the world. And so I want you to know that you have my support in doing so, and that I want to help you do so. This is all of our opportunity to just rock it out. Every day we are writing the book of our life. And you might be in a shit chapter right now. But the next chapter can be, how did you take that shit and turn it into fertilizer? How did you grow a garden? And I want you to know that it's possible, because a life well lived is the full range. A life well lived is all of it. And happiness is not that happy-dappy. Happiness is overcoming challenges, struggling well, and thriving, not despite what happened to you, but because of it. That you can stand at the end of your life, you can stand like on a mountaintop, and you can say, because of what I have been through, I rocked it out. Because I was abused, I am stronger. Because I was left out from the girls when I was younger, I now empower women. Because I had miscarriages, I created life for other people. And that's our opportunity. And I believe in you. And so with that, thank you for listening. I love you with every cell of my body. I hope you loved this episode. And if you did, please pause it right now. Go and leave that 5-star review. It is how women all over the world are finding the Purpose Girl podcast. You are part of a global community that we are building. We are changing the world one woman at a time. So please share this podcast. Share it with your friends. Share it with your sisters. Share it with the women at work. Share it with men. Share it with anyone overcoming challenges, because we all need these tools. Of course, let's come together on the Purpose Girls Facebook group. Go over to Facebook, type in Purpose Girls, Women's Happiness Network, and join the Purpose Girls group. It's totally free. It's a supportive environment. You can also follow me on Facebook at Coach Karen Rockhind, on Instagram at Karen Rockhind. And if you have not yet gone onto my website, purposegirl.com, you can download 50 happiness tips totally for free. You also can get the Living on Purpose guide, which is a mini ebook workbook of all sorts of questions to get you into and feeling your own purpose and what your life has taught you, so that you can go rock it out. We are changing the world one woman at a time. You and I both, we are part of this revolution. And I'm so excited. With that, may you live purposefully. May you love yourself, and may you love life. Bye for now.